24 states are suing the Trump administration over its latest global tariffs. Attorney generals and governors from these Democratic-led states say the tariffs are illegal. President Trump announced 10% global tariffs immediately after the Supreme Court struck down most of his previous tariffs last month. Several of the states leading this charge were also part of that previous lawsuit. Oregon Attorney General Dan Rayfield joins me now. Thank you very much for joining us today, sir. What is it about Donald Trump's new tariffs, this latest wave of tariffs? Why do you believe they are illegal?
Well, it's pretty simple. I mean, the first time that the president did tariffs under the emergency power, no other president had used that law. And once he lost in the Supreme Court, he dusted off another archaic statute that has never been used for tariffs, that frankly was implemented to react to economic conditions that only can happen when you have a fixed exchange, like the gold standard, the way the U.S. was prior to 1971. And so he's using this archaic statute to implement tariffs. And frankly, the things he's talking about doesn't allow him to use tariffs under this statute. No president has ever tried to do this. In fact, this statute has never been used in the history of the United States, and that's why we're pretty confident.
Okay, on that point, because it is a never-before-used provision, it is technically, for the technical part of this, it's Section 122 of the 1974 Trade Act. Because it is a novel approach, does that give Trump an advantage, the Trump administration an advantage, because they can create a narrative because it's never been done before?
I mean, this is what Trump does, right? He's lost and frankly, unlawfully yanked money out of the pockets of Americans for the better half of this last year. And instead of trying to actually repay Americans for the money that he's taken out of their pockets unlawfully, he's doubled down and asked his lawyers to find new lawyerly ways to try and spin this statute. I don't think that it helps him in any way, shape, or form. When you go into a court and you sit there and tell people, hey, yeah, no one's ever used this statute because this condition can no longer occur in a floating exchange dollar, I don't think that that's going to play well for him. And in fact, his own lawyers were saying under some of the previous arguments that they couldn't use this statute because it didn't say what they are now saying it means. So it's a really peculiar place for the federal government to be in right now.
These tariffs are time limited. They can only be in place for about 5 months unless they are extended by Congress. Tariffs are unpopular, and I don't anticipate that Congress would extend them. But given how slow the legal process can be and how it can move, do you think you can get any sort of decisions before the tariffs expire?
Well, I know a lot of people talk about that, but frankly, of course, your best possible recourse is getting an immediate order from the court, putting a pause on these tariffs. However, it doesn't matter whether we get relief in a year from now or 2 years from now. The fact is that he's unlawfully taking money out of Americans' pockets for 150 days. He's got to put that money back in their pockets. And that is what our focus is here, is to hold the line, hold him accountable. And you don't get to be the president and violate the laws of the country. You've got to follow the laws. And that's what our focus is. And just because you can have this 150-day period and in theory would expire doesn't mean you get to just take Americans' money.
You know, do you look at this as setting a precedent so that, you know, even if it expires and the tariffs go away, going forward, Trump can't rely on this to impose tariffs in the future? Is that part of why you're doing this now?
Is a part of the reason, right? I mean, what we really believe is that the chaotic nature of the way that the president has administered tariffs has been rough for our businesses. Frankly, it's been rough for our relationships with our valuable trade partners. And we need stability. Our business needs stability. Our, frankly, consumers and Americans need stability. And you need to go through the appropriate channels if you want to administer tariffs. Congress has the ultimate authority to do this. That's what the Constitution gave them. They've only given limited powers to the president to implement tariffs, and he could do so. He's just got to do so lawfully. But I think, as you noted, the president knows he can't get this through Congress, because if he did, or if he thought he could, he would have done it by now. He's been in office for a year. And you know what? Had he gone in the first couple of months and convinced Congress to pass the tariffs, boy, they would have been done right now, and this lawsuit wouldn't be here, and he wouldn't have that historical failure of a lawsuit in the Supreme Court earlier this month.
On the Supreme Court case, of course, the Trump administration, they lost. They had to end a wide swath of their tariffs. But we've had a ruling from a trade court that is paving the way for businesses to be able to get some refunds after the court ruled that. But U.S. Customs and Border Protection says it can't handle an order of that magnitude. What do you want to see sort of happen moving forward to deal with the issue of refunds?
This is the United States federal government, right? If you could find the way to take tariffs, you could find a way to put the money back into people's pockets. Every single year, they administer tax returns. In fact, the president, in his infinite wisdom, is sit there talking about how he's going to give these tariff refunds to every single American because he knows the Americans are the ones that have paid them. So if you can make all these boisterous claims, then all of a sudden throw your hands up when you get an embarrassing loss in the Supreme Court, seems pretty silly, doesn't seem very genuine to me. And in fact, when the government was arguing to pause all of the opinions and orders from the lower courts to get to the Supreme Court, they sat there and told every single court, the lower court and the appellate court, hey, we will honor refunds and we will honor them with interest. And now they're turning their back and trying to appeal and reversing course. It's an incredible betrayal from the leader of our country.
So looking ahead, these new tariffs that Donald Trump just imposed after the Supreme Court loss, as we talked about, they are time limited. And the way the Trump administration has sort of described them is they seem to be a Band-Aid solution. They will be in place so that there is some kind of tariff as they go through the formal process of looking at industry-specific tariffs. Canada has been hit very hard by some of those industry-specific tariffs on things like steel, aluminum, and lumber. Going forward, if he introduces tariffs on a whole bunch of other industries, do you plan to challenge those ones as well?
We're going to look tariff by tariff, every decision by decision, and make sure that the president is following the law. If he follows the law, he can do what Congress has authorized him to do. The moment he steps outside of the law, that's when we'll be back in court with the lawsuit.
But those industry-specific tariffs, those ones, they are more legally sound, right? We haven't seen the same sort of pushback through the courts for those.
Depends on how you do it. Right. And so that's why I was a little bit broad when I said, hey, we need to watch and see how they do the tariffs. The Trump administration has built a reputation on just saying things. Sometimes they follow through, sometimes they don't. These limited tariffs that, frankly, other presidents have used in the past require factual findings. They require reporting and really confined sets of factors before you can move forward with the tariff. So what we want to do from a legal perspective is making sure that they are following those various steps. What I can tell you to date is that they absolutely are not doing that. So it'll be very interesting to see what they do moving forward. And if they start cutting corners, or if they start coming up with inaccurate facts or conclusions, we'll be there to hold them in check. The other thing to remind yourself is tariffs are historically unpopular as a failed policy in the United States right now. And there's a high likelihood that Congress may shift in this upcoming election. And if that happens, you better believe that there's going to be a backstop in Congress to override any unlawful tariffs as well. Right now, attorneys general, such as ourselves, bringing these lawsuits are kind of the backstop in America right now. Once Congress shifts, it'll be a different story.
Attorney General Rayfield, we just got a warning we're about a minute or so to the Prime Minister who's going to take some questions, but I still want to keep asking you questions. If I jump in and interrupt you, that's what's happening right now.
Are you telling me your Prime Minister is more important than this interview?
There are some questions that journalists do want to ask him about what might be going on, I don't know, with conflicts around the world, with tariffs as well. Who knows? I don't know what's going to come out of that news conference is going to happen, but can you just describe to me what the impact of tariffs have been on your state?
Yeah, here's the thing. In Oregon, when you talk to Oregon businesses, first you're going to hear from restaurants that are purchasing food. The only place they can get some of those foodstuffs is overseas. And what does that mean? That means increased prices for consumers. In some cases, it means layoffs. Our agricultural nursery industry has an incredible tie to Canada. In fact, we have had decades-long relationships destroyed by a president in Washington, D.C., where, frankly, some of our products are being pulled off of the shelves. That impacts impacts our economy here in Oregon. We're a trade exposed state. We have a chocolate manufacturer in Portland, the same type of manufacturing jobs the president claims to want to bolster. It turns out you can't grow cacao in Oregon, and that's something that is most often grown overseas, increasing the costs, which is really tough on a small business where they have fixed price contracts for vendors because the cost of the goods go up, but their contracts stay the same. So these are the type of things that we're seeing. Even as a state, we've seen the revenue decline as we've looked out for our economic forecast. And that means less money for our schools, less money for healthcare. I mean, it hits every single section of our economy.
Really quickly, for Canadians who are watching this, the Canadian economy has been in has experienced some significant troubles because of the uncertainty, because of the tariffs. As an American, living through this moment, what would you say to your Canadian neighbors about sort of enduring this moment? We're actually going to go to Prime Minister Mark Carney. We'll chat again later.